Hello everyone and welcome to Tony's Healthy Kitchen. I am your host, Tony La Ferrara. Each episode of our 10-part video series will focus on a different health topic that is important to our well-being as we get older. With the help of our guests, we will explore and learn more about each topic from a medical perspective, and we will also focus on healthy food options, fitness tips, and delicious, easy to prepare recipes that will help us improve and maintain a healthy lifestyle as we get older. Well, today's episode, it's all about salt and hypertension. To help us understand how salt affects our body and our health is registered dietitian Rowena Leung. Hi, Rowena. Welcome to Tony's Healthy Kitchen.
Thank you. Hello. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you again, Rowena. Rowena, salt is the most common seasoning that we add to our food, and we need salt for good health. The problem is that we use too much of it. We consume too much of it. And since excess salt causes high blood pressure, it's no wonder it's getting a really bad reputation. So my question is sodium an essential nutrient? Do we need sodium in our diet?
Mm-hmm. So you've brought up a very good point, and like you've emphasized, sodium is an essential nutrient. So to maintain heart health, actually, there's something in our body called the sodium potassium pump.
Right.
So we definitely do need sodium, but at the same time, a lot of individuals wonder, or even they ask me, what is the difference between sodium and salt? So sodium is the actual mineral needed by our body, and we can only obtain it through foods. So for example, if you think about milk, you think about beets, you think about celery, they are definitely healthy choices, but these are all foods that naturally have salt or sodium in it. It's not, when we consume it, it's not in an excessive amount. But on the other hand, when we use table salt, or even if we're going to talk about Himalayan salt, or the pink salt, or
Right.
kosher salt, it's basically sodium chloride, which 40% is made up of sodium. So there is that key difference, and I want everybody to remember that sodium is an essential nutrient needed by our body to help maintain good heart health. But again, like you said, if we have too much of it, that's when we run into trouble, because sodium, not only for good heart health, we need it for regulation of the blood pressure, muscle function, and also to make sure that the fluids in the body stay balanced.
Right. And like I said before, the problem is that, we eat too much of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so a diet that reduces, replaces, and removes excess sodium is a good thing for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. So again, we're going to talk about this over and over again, but when we have too much salt in our diet, it causes our bodies, the kidneys to
Right.
overwork. So normally speaking, when we do have too much salt, kidneys know to excrete it through urine, or, if it's a hot day like the week before we've had, we sweat it out.
Yeah.
But there will come a point where if you keep eating and eating and eating salty foods, then the kidney won't be able to keep up. And that way salt will build up in the bloodstream. When there is too much water in the bloodstream, that's when our blood pressure increases. So yes, regardless of age, everybody should be conscious about salt.
Yeah, and the thing is that salt, the taste of salty foods, is something that we learn as we grow older, right? From the day we're born, we learn to like salty food. So it's something, it is possible to retrain our taste buds to use less salt in our diet, is it?
It very much is. So salt, like you said, it's a natural thing that our taste buds can taste. So in addition, sugar, the sourness, and also the bitterness, but there's also something called umami. So these are all the natural flavors that our taste buds can experience, but it's all about balance.
Oh, it is. And, we have learned that talking with you about other issues and other health topics. that balance is it's the most important thing, really, because we need all of these things in our diet. We need salt in our diet, but we need to be careful with it.
Exactly.
Rowena, how does salt affect blood pressure?
Right. So, like we briefly just mentioned, if our body has too much salt, then our kidneys will have to work harder to excrete it. There will come a point where our kidneys can't keep up with the demand, and that's when the salt builds up in the body. And when there's too much salt in the body, it retains water. And when there's too much water in the body, that's when the blood pressure can go up. Because again, we're making our bodies work harder and harder.
Right. And the thing is that there are no signs or symptoms of high blood pressure.
Exactly.
Which is why it's so dangerous, and we need to check it, almost daily.
Exactly. So, I mean, generally speaking, it is asymptomatic, but for some individuals, they can feel, minor symptoms like dizziness or whatnot. Right. But sometimes individuals don't even equate that, right? They're like, oh, today I'm just feeling a little lightheaded. Let me sit down. Let me just slow down. But they don't think about the blood pressure.
Right. And Rowena, what is hypertension?
Hypertension is measuring, or high blood pressure, it's measuring the amount of pressure to pump the oxygenated blood throughout our bodies to the needed places. And it's consistently high. So that's when our blood pressure needs to be brought down. So how does exactly the blood pressure increase? And this is potentially something that we experience as we age, because the arteries should be nice and flexible and very elastic. But if there's things like plaque, or, another word would be cholesterol, if there's a sticky kind of fat in our blood, like triglycerides, the arteries naturally will become more narrow. And when our arteries become more narrow, that's when, again, our body has to work harder to pump the oxygenated blood to the designated spots. Right. So again, that's basically what high blood pressure is. You keep making your heart work harder and harder.
Right. And Rowena, salt is not the only enemy of hypertension. Right. There are other factors that can cause hypertension, are they?
Exactly. So definitely if somebody's diet is very high in salt, that is a factor. Yep. But as we age, because again, there's a chance that individuals might have cholesterol issues, might have, triglyceride issues and other lipid issues, but also if somebody has a chronic disease, also known as heart disease, kidney disease, diabetes, if somebody just recently got diagnosed with sleep apnea, this puts somebody at higher risk for blood pressure.
Right.
But having said that, with sleep apnea, a lot of individuals who get diagnosed with this chronic disease often tend to be overweight and or obese. So again, it's all linked. And then, if somebody is overweight and or obese, potentially they are not engaging as many physical activities. And that could also be an issue. When somebody is experiencing too much stress, if there are somebody who likes to drink a lot, if they smoke a lot, right? These are all factors. But interestingly, ethnicity or race can also be a potential factor. So from many, many studies, African heritage individuals have a higher risk for developing high blood pressure compared to Caucasian individuals. But it's also interesting to note that individuals of African heritage are also at higher risk for stroke, heart failure, and kidney disease. So again, these are all things to be mindful of.
And Rowena, how does a low sodium diet help fight hypertension and improve our heart health?
Right. So again, when we think about how to lower our sodium intake or salt intake, we think about the DASH diet. The DASH diet is the dietary approach to stop hypertension. So again, think about incorporating lots and lots of whole grains. in our diet. So think about oatmeal, think about quinoa, think about sorghum, think about buckwheat, think about brown rice as opposed to white rice, think about buckwheat noodles as opposed to the usual pasta, and lots of vegetables. And of course, we want you to keep eating the dark green leafy vegetables, but that doesn't mean that other vegetables aren't important. Eat the color of the rainbow. You want the more colors, the better, just because all the different colors offer different antioxidants. But also don't forget, fruits go hand in hand with vegetables.
Yeah.
Right? But here's an important message for everybody. Everybody or most individuals tend to like fruits more than vegetables, but we really do have to balance it out. So making sure that there's an equal presence of vegetables as there is fruits in your daily diet. And part of the DASH diet is also the presence of dairy. So here we talk about, if you like to drink milk, try to pick 1 or 2%. Try not to go over 2% the milk fat content. If we are talking about yogurt, there's always the Greek yogurt option, or the skyr yogurt, the Icelandic Greek yogurt, just because it is more protein rich. And then going on to incorporating lean meats, poultry, and fish. So again, when we talk about fish, I would even go a step further and try to encourage everybody to eat the omega-3 rich options, which include the pinky orangey fish, salmon, tuna, trout, Arctic char, mackerel, sardines, right? So these are at least in your diet at least 2 times a week. But don't forget about the nuts, seeds, and legumes. So when somebody chooses to eat a fruit as a snack, what I would now encourage you to do is to maybe pair it with a handful of nuts or seeds just to help you keep you fuller longer. When we talk about using fats and oils, definitely we need fats and oils in our diet because there's certain vitamins like vitamin A, D, E, and K that need the fat to be absorbed. But again, keep in mind that each time you use an oil or a fat, try not to go over 1 tablespoon at a time. And again, overall, we just want, the sweets and the added sugar, it is allowed, but try to keep it at a minimum.
Yeah, and you've been saying it all along, everything in moderation.
Yeah.
Everything needs to be balanced and so on. But one of the problems is that, over 75% of sodium that we get in our diet comes from processed foods.
Right.
And not really from the salt shaker, does it?
Yes, that is very, very true.
Yeah.
So interestingly, just because again, from 2020 up until now, we've been living the pandemic life. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about, pre-COVID lifestyle. I would say a lot of individuals, because of lifestyle, because of lack of time, they did have to rely on prepackaged foods. But you know what? There's a good that came out of the pandemic in the sense that because we ultimately all were forced to be in the kitchen more, either people took the time to, better their kitchen skills, or they took the initiative to learn how to cook. So right now, as we speak, because we're still in the pandemic, I think that people have definitely relied less on prepackaged foods. But having said that, when they're cooking, they're incorporating other spices in their cooking. So they're not just relying on salt. They're really looking at the mint, the parsley, the dill, right? Cilantro. They're looking at za'atar. They're looking at oregano, cumin, turmeric, right, to flavor their foods. But I would say if somebody, regardless of pandemic or not, if they're still relying or they need to look at prepackaged foods, then look at that nutrition label and look at that percent daily value. Because if in one serving you've got more than 15% of salt intake in one serving, that's really considered a high source of sodium.
Too much, yeah, it's a no-no.
Right. And if it's less than 5%, that's a good option. So going back to how much salt should you look at? What would be the daily limit would be 2,300 milligrams per day, which is about a teaspoon. If 2,300 milligrams is too hard to remember, 2,000 is a nice and even number. So aim for 2,000 milligrams of salt per day. Or realistically, I mean, our bodies really only need 1,500 milligrams.
Right, and one thing I've noticed, Rowena, is that there's such a large variety of salt available out there now. You know, the pink salt and the sea salt and whatever other salt they come up with. The thing is that, you know, they're all basically the same thing, aren't they?
They basically are. I mean, with the thing about the kosher salt or the Himalayan or the pink salt or the black salt is because they're bigger chunks.
Right.
Ultimately, you don't need to use as much. And of course, there will be more minerals and whatnot associated with, I'll say, the salt varieties. But again, salt is salt, and you do not want to go over 2,000 or 2,300 milligrams per day. It still really is, don't use more than a teaspoon.
Yeah, exactly. So you touched on the DASH diet before.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about that. I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the DASH diet.
Yeah, so I suppose now we can talk about serving sizes. So when we talk about whole grains, we want to, so we'll start with space on a plate. So, you know, on a dinner plate or a lunch plate, think about half of your plate being vegetables or fruit, preferably all vegetables, and then a quarter of your plate being grains and a quarter of your plate being some sort of protein. Some individuals are fine with this as a visual aid, whereas others want to get more detailed.
Right.
So when we talk about the grain portions, we're saying don't have more than 6 to 8 servings a day.
Mm.
So when we talk about a serving, we're talking about a slice of bread. So if you have 2 slices for breakfast, that's already 2 servings, right? And then in terms of the dry cereal, when we talk about dry cereal, we're referring to oatmeal. So when I say 1 serving of dried oatmeal, I typically like to refer to a quarter cup dried oatmeal, which results to half a cup cooked. That would be equivalent to eating 1 piece of bread or 1 serving. When we talk about rice or pasta or noodles, then we're talking about half a cup cooked rice, noodles, pasta as 1 serving.
Right.
So again, 1 cup cooked rice, pasta, or noodles will be 2 servings. And oftentimes, if you again reimagine what 1 cup, the measuring cup, it's not very big. Individuals do tend to eat more than 1 cup cooked, but that's something to keep in mind because again, the general rule of thumb is 6 to 8 servings per day of whole grains. When we talk about vegetables or fruits, really, so vegetables or fruits, it really should be about the size of your fist.
Right.
Right? So think about the Fuji apples or the Honey Crisp. They're amazing, but they're a little too big to be considered 1 portion. So it would be good if you could share it with a friend or whatnot. I'm thinking more like Macintosh would be the appropriate size if we're talking about apples. In terms of oranges, they're fine. But if we talk about vegetables, so we talk about the dark green leafy vegetables, rapini, Swiss chard, kale, collard greens. But again, don't forget about eggplant, zucchini. Zucchini can be quite rich in lutein. Don't forget about bok choy because again, these are flavor neutral vegetables that can pretty much be added to anything and they're relatively easy to cook. Mushrooms are the only vegetables that have vitamin D in them. So again, but keep in mind, mentioning vitamin D, you still need to take the supplement, especially because if we live in Canada, because we just get enough sun, because realistically, to even get 600 IUs of vitamin D from mushrooms alone, you've got to eat 5 cups cooked at each sitting, which is unrealistic for most people, right? So, but mushrooms are great. Don't forget the different colored peppers, red, orange, yellow. They will have a higher amount of vitamin C compared to the green peppers. So again, when we talk about the lean meats, protein, and fish, so mentioned earlier, I really want everybody to focus on the omega-3 rich fish. So salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, herring, trout, Arctic char, just because again, with the omega-3 fat, it is anti-inflammatory. It is good for your heart health in the sense that it can help bring down the bad cholesterol. But when we talk about lean meats and poultry, imagine the size of the deck of cards and the thickness of a deck of cards. That is the amount of protein one should have.
So Rowena, what recipes can you share with us that can help maintain a good blood pressure and a normal, healthy heart?
Yeah, so I would say, why not try a quinoa, black bean, white bean salad? So again, I'm just thinking from a general population perspective, they're looking for fast, easy, something that they can batch cook and save for the week or, a few days so that you're not always slaving in the kitchen. So basically, like I was mentioning, the key ingredients would be quinoa, black bean, white bean, and then you chop in some cucumber, onion, and the dressing would be extra virgin olive oil, a little bit of lime juice, a little bit of red wine vinegar, a little bit of oregano, a little bit of thyme, a little bit of salt and pepper, and you've got such a flavorful salad. And I find the more you marinate this salad, the better it tastes.
Yeah.
The other thing is, especially now, given that it's sort of, summer / beginning of fall, but we're still having wonderful weather, people still might be interested in barbecuing. And individuals might have finger foods with tortilla chips and salsa, but I encourage individuals to try a pineapple pepper salsa where you've got pineapple, pepper, a little bit of cilantro, a little bit of lime juice, a little bit of salt and pepper, and that can actually be a nice topping on a burger or even salmon. But also, as another spice substitute, instead of salt, have you ever used za'atar? So za'atar is actually a Middle Eastern blend. So again, depending on which part of the Middle East somebody is from, there's different varieties. But the key sort of ingredients common to all blends would be oregano, margarine, thyme, cumin, coriander, sesame seeds. But the key is sumac.
Yes.
So just keep in mind za'atar, because that can add such a nice new flavor to whatever recipes. But also keep in mind, sometimes your favorite recipe, it can be made heart healthy. We've just got to make sure when you use the pre-made sauces to be very conscious, right? So whether it's teriyaki sauce, bulgogi sauce, soy sauce, tamari sauce, we just have to bring down the portion. So remember to look at that label and to refer to that percentage daily value. And if one serving, it could be a 1 teaspoon, it could be 1 tablespoon. If it's more than 15%, might want to go for the low sodium version. But again, keep in mind the low sodium version is the low sodium version of the original product. So you can't compare 2 different brands. It's literally, when you're doing the comparison, it's the original versus the low sodium version.
Rowena, I would like to share with you my recipe for chickpeas with rosemary and garlic ginger shrimps. Soak 3 cups of dried chickpeas in cold water for about 24 hours. In a large pot, add 2 tablespoons of olive oil, the chopped carrots, onions, celery, 2 cloves of garlic, and the rosemary. Add your soaked chickpeas, 2 bay leaves, cover with water and let it cook until tender. Only add a teaspoon of salt after the chickpeas are fully cooked. Now, for the shrimps, in a medium pan, add 2 tablespoons of olive oil and the rosemary. Add your shrimps, grated ginger, and grated garlic. And let it cook for about a minute or so before you flip them over. At this point, you can add a splash of white wine and let it go for about another minute. Add your cooked chickpeas, and there you have it. Healthy, nutritious, delicious chickpeas with rosemary and garlic ginger shrimps. Rowena, thank you very much. Once again, I've learned a lot from you today about salt and hypertension. Is there a last word that you want to leave with us?
Right. So I think, again, the key here is don't overdo the salt. Keep in mind that it's 2,000 milligrams per day that you're aiming for. That's about a teaspoon. And remember that no matter what salt variety you are using, whether it's the Himalayan salt, it's the kosher salt, it's the black salt, whatever salt, it is salt. And you aim to control the portion, but also don't forget that it's not just the salt that we add to our foods. It may be the other sauces that we might be using while cooking. So refer to the nutrition label. Make sure that the percent daily value in one serving, make sure that you are picking something ideally less than 5% in one serving. And if we're talking about the cooking sauces, ideally it's, 1 teaspoon or 1 tablespoon. And if you're finding that you are using a lot of something, bring it down. And again, think outside the box. Salt is not just the one seasoning agent. There's so many herbs and spices out there to make food flavorful. And yes, healthy can taste delicious.
Absolutely. Rowena, thank you for your wonderful masterclass on salt and hypertension. And we look forward to seeing you again in Tony's Healthy Kitchen.
See you again.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
And thank you to all of you for dropping by my kitchen, Tony's Healthy Kitchen. Please join me again next week. We will talk about herbs and spices with our registered dietitian, Filomena Bernache in Serra. Until then, be well and stay healthy.